Who are the people behind creating magical brands? What have been the journeys that led them there? The human stories of struggles and success.
And the stories which came out was so
But some of them
Human Works presents the human side of building brands.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the human side. Today, we are talking to a new and yet feels like somebody we would have known for a long time in our journeys. We want to interact with each other. I have Rahul Chawra with us. He has been embedded in the fields of advertising and brand creation for more than, I would say, 15, 16 years, if I get that right, Rahul.
Yeah, that's
Not only is he been a planner in various agencies helping to build brands, he's also taken the brave step of mentoring and teaching people interested in joining this brand creation journey for, I think, more than 4 years with Decode Labs. And I think you guys should definitely check that out. I'll put the links to all of that in the blog post and at the end of this video. So do check that out. There is a lot of learning that Rahul willingly gives of himself and his time to a lot of his students across the world. So welcome to the human side, Rahul.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And if I've botched anything in that introduction, please feel free to correct any of the things that I've said.
That's absolutely correct.
So what we generally do here is, I guess the only way we have known to classify it is meandering conversations. So let's start for those who don't know us, and definitely I don't know your personal journey. Let's start right at the very beginning. Where are you originally from? What are your parents like? What was childhood like?
Yeah. So I'm actually from a really, really small town in India called Raniganj. It's like a couple of hours from Calcutta. And from the very early stage of my life was one of those stages where we went through a lot of those, financial difficulties, and then we kind of stuck together as a family, seeing each other through. I actually started working when I was still in school in like class 6 or class 7.
Wow.
Where I would go to school, I would come back, and then we had a business in the house itself where I would do screen printing. And then that time we were kind of funding my brother's education. And then after that, my sister was the one who was taking over the business, and she was helping with my education and things like that. So the first stage of that, the childhood stage, I actually didn't want to have too much of fun and all of that. I actually wanted to grow up and, go out and do something quickly. And the early days of the business and everything kind of helped me. So I wouldn't say that my childhood was robbed. I had my share of fun, but I was enjoying doing what I was doing, with my family and all. So that was the very, very early days of my, early years of my life. After which I moved to Calcutta and did my college and all. I think that that desire to not let money be a impediment in life kind of continued from that stage onwards, and it's kind of gone all the way. It's still something which I don't want it ever to become an impediment in my life. So yeah, so it started over there and it's kind of continued all my life.
So at the age of, very young, you start to work.
Yeah.
And how does that make you different from, let's say, the other kids in school? Like, how do you say, did it change how you approach things? One is, of course, the money aspect that I get, but yeah, as a person, were you different?
In many ways, I thought I was different. So, this whole thing started creating this desire in me that I want to do something with my life. And it wasn't about my parents pushing me and therefore I do things, which was the case with a lot of other friends that I knew. And it was more of well, this is the reality of life, and start accepting it. And after that acceptance, it was like more of like, I'm actually enjoying this. Like, I was actually, there's a lot of craft involved with the business of screen printing, and and there are like chemicals, there are things happening and all of that. So it's a complicated thing, and trying to solve that puzzle, trying to create and print things, it's so simple, like, screen printing as a business, but trying to take it to a level of perfection where we were like the best. And then, at that point in time, if someone wanted something to be printed which was like of a high quality or something, they would always take it to Calcutta. And then there came a point where I had mastered the craft so well that stopped happening. So that was like, a sense of achievement that, okay, I've kind of finally managed to crack this. So it did make me a little different. It did start, building me in a slightly more entrepreneurial kind of a mindset that, I want to become an achiever. And which kind of, led me to decide that, okay, in this small town, there is only so much that I can achieve. So I need to move to the city. And then once I moved to Calcutta, I was enrolled there, but I was like, extremely competitive, and I would go for all the college festivals, and, I kind of debated at the national level. I went everywhere possible where I could compete. The desire was always like, how do I prove myself, not to anyone else, but how do I prove to myself that I can achieve this? And all the creative interest areas, like, I've had interest in theater, so I went there, I participated, I won. And that was like, okay, now I'm satisfied. Then I like, okay, debates I need to crack. So, probably the only thing I couldn't crack was dance or fashion shows and, those kind of events. But largely, anything which had to do with impromptu dumb charades, all these kind of events, I would like just go all out. I still have a file somewhere which has like over like 150 odd certificates which I collected during that phase where I went from one college to another college like a madman. And that was the starting point of me realizing that it's not just proving to myself, but there is also another element over there, which is like, my interest in slightly creative side of things. And which kind of what happened towards the end of the college was that I was getting into, like, I knew a couple of people. They told me that there's a opening in Standard Chartered Bank. And I was like, okay, great. Bank job was like an aspirational job, right? And for me, sitting in that air-conditioned office was such a huge deal. Like, me getting a job where I can sit in an air-conditioned office was like the biggest thing that I could have imagined. So I went, it was an internship, got converted into a full-time job, and I was extremely happy with that. But I think in less than 2 years, I realized that this is not really the kind of, work I want to do all my life. And and I was talking to a couple of my friends, people that I had a little bit of like, people that I could relate to who were slightly on the creative side as well. And from there, I kind of understood about the ad business. And I was like, okay, these guys are becoming copywriters and they are becoming like planners and all of that. What am I doing? So, which kind of led me to start exploring. And someone again told me about an opening which was in Nepal. So from Calcutta, I decided to go to Nepal of all places. And that was my first advertising job. So yeah, so it was a boutique agency. I spoke to them. They were interested in hiring someone, and I decided to take the leap. So it was a small agency. I learned my fundamentals in advertising in that agency. I also contributed a lot, and it was a beautiful team, like a tiny house where the agency was, and we would all like work together, work very hard. We gave the bigger agencies in Nepal a run for their money when we won the Nokia business, which was like a massive pitch when they were launching in Nepal. And that was like one big one. And then a couple of other businesses, the leading publication of Nepal, and then, another new bank of Nepal and all of that. So net, it turned out to be a far, better kind of an opportunity than what I had anticipated. I went there imagining that, okay, live in the mountains, have a chill time. I was still like, although ambitious, but I'm still like, okay, this is still my time to have a little bit of fun as well in life. So, but it was a whole package where everything kind of added to each other. Very quickly, I realized that if I want to grow in this business, I need to be at the heart of where the action is. And, those early days, I realized that, okay, Nepal was good. I learned a lot. I worked with great people. We did some kick-ass work. But if I ever went and I told anyone that, listen, I worked on this brand in Nepal, on an international scale, I really stand nowhere. Right. So I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. And I decided to move back to India. I did my postgrad. I was still in like two minds whether I should get into films or I should continue with advertising. And then as the professors from the films world started coming in and taking our lectures and guest lectures and all of that, I realized that films is like struggle for 10 years at least. I would have to struggle if I'm not very lucky. And I was like, that's not happening. I have a loan to repay. The day I get out of the college, my repayment begins. So I decided to continue with advertising, got out of college, and I just jumped into the ad world in Bombay. And I started with Saatchi and Saatchi. Then from there, I moved to Ogilvy. And then from there, I actually got a break to move to Singapore and start working with Grey, then VML. Then VML got merged with YNR, which finally, after like 5.5 odd years over there, I started my own company. So it was an interesting journey, but it was pretty linear. From the time I started working in my first advertising job in Bombay, it was pretty linear. I was always the planner, always the person who's trying to, be a little creative, but at the same time, I thought I wasn't that creative, so I never went and took the leap to move into the creative side of the business. So I was more comfortable on the strategy, which is mix of creativity without the craft of the writing ability or the craft of design and all.
So as I'm listening to you, Rahul, one thing that is striking, what an amazing journey. But first of all, to start so young, be in what I would have considered, of course, all of us, I guess, almost all of us in my generation at least, you're younger than me, but you had the middle class dream, right? Study well, get a good job, then you're set, and then all of life's decisions there is a time for it, and you will naturally get inducted into it, and you reach that, I guess. So first question that came to my mind is that when you hit that, when you talked to air conditioned room and Standard Chartered Bank, it's like Standard Chartered Bank is it's like what parents boast to their, mera beta Standard Chartered Bank mein kaam karta hai. That's a milestone in and of itself, almost like you've been, like in the mob, they say you're made man. That's the marker for it. Yeah. How did they react when you got the job, and and how was their reaction when you decided to leave it and pursue Nepal? How did that? I'm just curious about that.
That was actually true, because when I joined Standard Chartered, I myself was so proud of the whole, achievement. And I thought that this is my dream come true. This is going to be my retirement. I would just move up the ranks and, life would go on and on and on. But very soon I realized that the things that I was doing was not really bringing me that amount of joy. And having contributed to my family and, being very open within the family amongst each other, we would talk and we would discuss these things. And, I started expressing a little bit of discomfort at the fact that, while this job is it is for me as well, it's a dream job, but then it's not really making me feel good. And and the good thing about my parents is that they were always like, yeah, just go with the flow. Like, where do you want to go? And just explore what you enjoy. And then I started reflecting on what is it that I used to enjoy, which was in my college days, the more creative side of things. It came naturally to me. And then, at some point I told them that, listen, I'm speaking to this person in Nepal, and, I think I want to take the leap. And they were scared as shit. But I think the reason why they probably agreed at that point was that two reasons. We had someone living in Kathmandu, a relative living in Kathmandu. So that gave them a little bit of comfort that, okay, there's someone there. We know the place. We've been there. And then secondly, it was like the day I started earning and, kind of taking care of myself. And till the point I was in college, I was still, I would still be sent a little bit of a stipend every month to take care of myself. But then after that, the moment I started working, it was like, I can finally take care of my expenses by myself, and I can actually send some money back home. So my parents started treating me with a lot more respect and a lot more independence. And they were like, okay, it's your decision. You go ahead if you want. Yeah, so it didn't have that story value to it until I finally moved to Bombay. And then again, I could talk about like, okay, I'm in these big agencies and all. Until then, it was a little bit of a lull kind of a phase for them that, मेरा बेटा किधर काम करता है. But I think it kind of all started coming together gradually.
Nice, very, very nice. So you studied in Calcutta. So when you left home, when you completed your schooling in Raniganj, and when you went to Calcutta, what did you study? Did you study in the creative fields, or were you studying something?
No, not at all. I was studying. I was enrolled in a college where I was studying BCom honors.
Okay.
And actually, the first 2 years I spent in Calcutta, where I would spend very little time in college. I was part-timing at a cyber cafe. Those days you used to have cyber cafe. That was also because, one, I could get some pocket money, and two, I could get familiar with computers, which I never had access to before that. So I was like, okay, here at least I can have a few hours of working, sitting with a computer. So that was happening, but I would spend a lot of time, like most of my time would go into events and, trying to get into theater events and all kinds of things. And the last year of college was even probably the funniest, because I was enrolled in Calcutta, but I went and started living in Bombay, where my brother was working.
Okay.
And I decided to take up a job in a call center. So I'm like full-time enrolled in college.
Okay.
I paid for attendance, and I was working full-time in Bombay. And then just before my, the final college exams, I moved back to Calcutta, and I kind of started, stayed back in Calcutta after the exams because I got that job opportunity from Stanchart. So yeah, there's always been like, something I'm doing, whether I'm, either some cyber cafe. I was selling mineral water for my dad's friend once. I was doing screen printing at home. So I've done a lot of these odd things.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, because as somebody whose life was very regimented, right? I'm just reflecting while you're talking about it. I mean, I had no option but to study. My parents are very middle class government servant dad. So you have to study, and education is what's going to land you that great college, which is going to land you that college, that job, and then you'll continue. And that's the path to at least jumping into the next level of class in society, if you can think about it. From middle class to upper middle class, if you want to jump, education is the only pathway to success. So all other distractions from what they would consider education, liberal arts and societies and music and all that, were to be managed. And nothing takes the focus away from education. But I get the sense that at least in college, you kind of did all that.
I went all out.
Childhood, yahi tha ki, like you should study and focus on academics, or childhood also you're free to let?
No, I I was always given a lot of independence by my parents, which is actually, like most of what I am today, I kind of attribute to them because they are very not traditional compared to the rest of my extended family. Uh, they were extremely independent with me, my brother, my sister. Pursue what you want, spend time. Deciding to help out in the family's business was also something which was like, not really imposed upon. These days, you would think of it as child labor, but it was something
Right,
like, I'm seeing something interesting happen in the house and I want to be a part of it. And I think I can do it better than what my dad is trying to do, right? At least
right.
my dad was more of the business development person. I was the one who was the person actually doing the printing and the craft of it. So there was always a lot of freedom that he had given me, and a lot of these decisions kind of emerged out of that freedom, where I wanted to explore 10 things and see, what is it that I like the most. Like, I've explored like cyber cafe, working in a cyber cafe because I wanted to get familiar with computers and be comfortable with computers. I went and I spent a lot of time in a library, because I realized that my English language was not that good. And by then I had, the moment I came to Calcutta, I realized that, wow, these kids, they like talk so fluently in English as if like, like I studied in an English medium school, but I feel like, very scared talking to them in English. And I was like, how do I become like these kids and then better than these kids? And so I would spend time in the library. There was a time when, there was a neighborhood library and I had polished like 3 books in one day. And, that was also like, I could read very fast at that point. And I finished all of their books in like, neighborhood library. I finished all of their books in the in the first couple of months. And then I kind of went on and I would read in front of a mirror, try and improve my language, mark words and try and improve my vocabulary. So all of that was also happening. I used to try and write for I used to write for Statesman, uh, which was one of the early things. Like, they used to take like reporters as cub reporters from schools, and I got selected for that. And I used to write. So towards the college years, that kind of changed into more of professional writing, and I would cover a couple of beats here and there, and it would be like a week of effort for that 200 rupees that you would get on a freelance article, which was a lot of money for me. Like, and the byline in a newspaper like, Statesman, and then later on I wrote like a couple of articles in Times of India. I was like, wow, this is like so exciting. But then again, that also was something that didn't excite me enough as much as the more creative things were kind of exciting me. And I would see things on TV and I was like, wow, I want to be closer to that world than, this journalism world. And later I jumped into banking because it was like Standard Chartered Bank and all. But then I realized that, no, this is not really where I want to spend my life.
So nowadays, people like, I guess even me, we formally learned advertising in college. Did you do that part also, or was it all like from Nepal and pretty much?
So Nepal was first. After that, when I was doing my postgrad, when I specialized, it was a course which was management and media included film, journalism, PR, advertising. And in the first year, we kind of did a little bit of all of it. But in my second year, I specialized in advertising. I didn't learn too much in that college because I had seen a little bit of advertising, and I realized that at least the academic side of advertising was not that great. And, the practical side had taught me a lot more. So, but I was like, okay, fine. At least I'm like seeing what theories have existed, So a lot of things which I probably didn't know, or a lot of things which I knew intuitively, I saw the reasoning where it was coming from. But I think the real advertising training actually started when I joined Saatchi and Saatchi. And it started when I started working with a couple of clients who have very rigorous marketing processes and techniques. So that is something which I'm always fortunate. I always consider myself extremely fortunate, because the early days of my advertising career, which was with Saatchi and then with Ogilvy, a bulk of the work that I used to do was for clients who are extremely structured in marketing. And that was P&G on one side, Mead Johnson on the other side, then Unilever on the third side. So these clients had such a beautiful way of, looking at marketing as a whole, trying to understand how communication forms a part of it. And then, the briefs were inspiring when they used to come from these clients. So I was working, majority of my time would be spent on these clients, and then a small part of my time would be spent on some of the other clients. Actually, we had a intersection over there where I worked on C8, and you guys had just completed a project for turning the brand around, and then we kind of worked on the communication part of C8 after that. So that was the time, the early days in advertising.
Okay. So was planning always the destination? Like a lot of people, like I, for example, started in account management, but there's no entry to account planning. You had to cut your teeth in account management, and then if you had the if you had the spark, you would end up in planning. Was that the thought?
That was true for me as well. Like when I started in Saatchi, I was on account management, and I realized that I wanted to be the person who is contributing from a direction level to the final work that happens. And I realized that it is the creatives who do that, and it is the planners who do that from a strategy perspective. And at my level, at an entry level, in an account management role, there was nothing that I was doing apart from making sure that things move and timelines are met, and and the coordination required happens. And maybe at a senior level, things start changing for an account management person. But at that level, I was like, this is really not I literally have no say. I just have to listen to these people, talk to these people. And that was frustrating from the very first day, because I thought I could contribute. I had an opinion. So I think within the first couple of weeks itself, I had made up my mind that I want to make a switch to planning. It took me a few months before I could formally move, because I spoke to my boss, who then spoke to the head of planning. And then, I was given the opportunity to do a lot of groundwork for strategy, do a little bit of this review, do this analysis, do this, did all of that patiently for the next couple of months. And then finally, I was transitioned from account management to strategy. So then kind of once I was on the strategy side, then that journey kind of continued, that, because it's very hard to get that break in planning directly.
Was there a formal induction to strategy, or do people just learn on the job? Which hota hai? I'm always curious.
So every agency that you work at typically has their own processes. They have certain frameworks that they have built when it comes to planning. So those frameworks are useful, but over the years, what I have seen is that it's the same masala which is being spun in 5 different ways. It's like how clients have brand key, brand onion, brand this, brand triangle, brand quadrilateral. So that also happens on the agency side, where there is this brief and that framework and all of that. One of the good things which I learned at Saatchi from my boss in the very beginning was the fact that, okay, there are frameworks. They are going to assist you with when you're looking for a starting point, or how should you approach things, but don't make the frameworks the end point. that's just a starting point if you are looking for a way to structure things and things like that. Always focus on, like, what really is going on. So while frameworks and things have been there, there is rarely a formal introduction to planning. It's those frameworks and all that kind of are useful, but the actual learning when it comes to planning happens as you start working on one piece of brief to the next kind of a thing. The early days, you are not given too much. You are given a little bit of, like, do the more of the, do an analysis of this kind, look at all the competitors, compare this, compare that. So you're doing more of the grunt work. But then as you do that 100 times, you automatically start having a bigger point of view, and that's where you start writing briefs and start writing a strategy perspective and things like that. So yeah, so it's a lot of, like, learn on the job. Frameworks and processes do exist, but not really that useful.
So just I'm also reflecting, and I've talked to other people also, and I'm reflecting on my own journey and the journey of others. I see some parallels on this, which is that almost all of us came from, I'm sure there are people who were born to the manner born and, came from South Mumbai and stuff like that, and they do well in this job. But there is a lot of us who came from, I guess, in the Indian context, from the consumer world. Yeah. Finally, now you're communicating almost in a way back to us.
Correct.
Younger versions of us. So
Correct.
We came through that journey. And then in our upbringing, there has been events or self-driven thing that made us gain diversity of experience.
Yeah.
You are not just one thing.
Yeah.
Would you say that in your work, especially in the early days as a planner, I'm sure going forward, this diversity of personal life experiences is something that you intuitively tend to draw from in the advertising profession itself, especially as a planner?
I think that is probably a unique advantage that I feel I have over a lot of people who don't have that diversity of experience. So living in so many cities, on one side, I don't have a place that I can think of and I can say that this is my home. But at the same time, small town to a small city to a country which is different but still culturally similar, to, like, Gujarat, Pune, Bombay, and then moving here in Singapore, and then I've been traveling since I've been here. Every time I have gone to a new place, that curiosity in me kind of kicks in. I want to understand who these people are. If they are better than me, then, in what way, and how can I be like them or better than them? But that's actually an effort to try and understand people, to try and understand them, like break them down and bring them at a very human level. So there are similarities, like, to put it very simply, like when I was in my small town, Raniganj, I used to think that people in Calcutta are very, like, modern, advanced, and, like, superior than me. But once I got there and once I understood them and once I started breaking them down, I realized that these are actually very similar people. It's just a different background which has led to a few things which are different, and I can also achieve all of that. And then from Calcutta, when I would go and see the people in Bombay and the pace and, the speed at which they would think and they would work and they would run and all of that, in the beginning, it was overwhelming. And I would be like, okay, these people are, like, so much more better than me, and, they're so much more smarter than me and things like that. But then as I started, going a little deeper, finding out, then pushing myself and trying to, merge into that world, I realized that it's all the same. And same thing when I moved overseas. So all these doubts that I had that, this world is going to be totally different. At a human level, I found a lot of similarities. But this experience of moving from one place to another also has kind of sharpened my eyes to see and look out for those differences and then try and break them down, that which kind of has made me more observational, and which actually helps being a planner. Trying to observe people and trying to understand what really is it about them that is so unique. And in some cases I would want to ape it and and improve upon it, but in some cases I would realize that, okay, at a fundamental level they're just same. It's like slightly different trajectory compared to me.
Very interesting, Rahul. And I guess it's a natural segue a little bit, because I was going to ask you the next question, then we'll talk about the teaching journey itself. And I'm thinking about all these life experiences that you have, and the educational experience, and the reflection that, practical knowledge that you learned in Nepal or working in ad agencies is superior, and what the academic instruction gave you was to understand what you are intuitively doing, and then your life experiences now help you break down people, understand them, no matter which city you go to, and you're kind of using the same frameworks, and what used to look unattainable, very quickly you're able to see that, okay, it's just a marginal gap. Should you choose to, you can bridge that gap, and you can keep repeating that, and it has helped you become a better planner. So if you get a young planner who's joining the agency, or who he or she has come to the firm, and they are looking for guidance, because obviously when I was a young planner, I was like, unformed. You will say there is a lot of raw energy, but it is not really channeled in a certain way. How do you guide them? What do you tell them? These are the few things that if you do, things will be okay.
Yeah. I think one of my pet peeves these days is that in the advertising world, amongst planners, we only tend to see Google planners, and that really is probably my biggest pet peeve, and that's something which I try to break on the very first opportunity I have with the planners who are speaking to me, or the planners who've worked with me. But it's important to really step out of your desk and your office and go out, smell the grass, and try and observe people. You don't even have to talk to them in every situation. If you can talk to them, even better. Try and see different kind of people. Try and speak to them. Try and understand what really is going on. So that's the most fundamental thing that I think any person in marketing, especially planners, should do, which is really just stop looking at your computer and go out and understand what people really are like. So that's the main piece of advice. I think the second piece of advice is actually something which comes more from working together and growing together. And I kind of grow with every person that I have worked with. And now I know that there is a term which kind of describes it, which is like first principles thinking. All these years, I never knew about what is first principles thinking. But, when you've gone out and you've met people, and when you've done a little bit of research and, studied the category and things like that, right? After that, just sitting together and, not limiting yourself to, okay, the brief template or the strategy structure is supposed to be like this. So, after that, it's important to just talk. And to try and break it down, and then try and evaluate every single aspect. Try and put 100 things next to each other, and then try and see how you can connect the dots. That is an experiential teaching that happens over a period of time, which I think is not something which I give as advice, but is something which people experience in the process. So one of the examples, if I could, was that when I was working with my team in Singapore, we would usually, whenever someone has worked on a certain kind of brief, they've done some research and all of that. After that, we used a very horrible term for it, but we used to call it like a planning gangbang.
That means it sticks in your memory.
Correct. So I still remember, and all the planners, they still remember that, we used to have these gangbangs. But the point being that, that was just a open discussion. That was an agenda-free discussion, and that was a discussion where, like, I would be there, the junior most to the senior most planners, all of us would be there, and the person who has been working on the project would just talk and share that, listen, this was the brief, this is how I started, these are the things which I was looking at, and a few things which kind of stood out for me, and then kind of build from there, and then you start breaking it down, things start connecting, and then you kind of put it together once again, and then you have a neat looking brief, or a template, or whatever you want. You can fit it into any template after that, but that process is very, very important. And that process is also something which I see these days it's a bit lacking in agency world, and I find it very annoying. Just like planners, they don't have the time or sometimes the intent or interest in going out and meeting people. Similarly, there are a lot of planners who tend to just start with a template, and after they've done a little bit of secondary research, and then they just go like one after the other. But doing that little bit of first principles kind of an approach is very, very important before you before you start drawing anything. It's like really evaluating all aspects and having a very free flow kind of a conversation around that.
It's an interesting conversation I was having with other planners across my careers, and there is always this. I mean, in the agency, I guess in many ways, depending on what the output of the agency is, how you are known as, you get pigeonholed either into a strategic consulting firm or a creative hotshop. And there are many in between in various iterations. And this is the broad ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And planners were, while they may not have been this way earlier, but at least there was a heyday in the 90s, and I'm not familiar with advertising now, but I don't think it would have radically altered.
Yeah.
Who are the stars or the rabbit out of the hat in a strategic agency for acquiring new business?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the creative guys in the creative agency are equally. Whoever gets the business, gives the client word, who the client picks up the phone, senior most client calls, where the center of gravity of that agency leans towards, right?
Correct.
But as a planner who's actually doing the work, where do you think your greatest source of joy comes from? Is it winning the pitch or something else?
So, in the early days of my planning life, when I joined on the account management side, I saw planning to be much more interesting, where I could contribute. And so I kind of put in all my effort to try and move into planning. But then after being in planning and, the early days in Ogilvy, I had that existential crisis in a professional sense that, is this really what I am enjoying so much? Because the pressure was immense, the hours and, the effort and everything was immense. The money was like pathetic. So
some things haven't changed in advertising, have they?
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, is this really what I want to do? And continue like a little bit of struggle, and I will earn at some point in time, but is this really something which excites me to that extent? And that trying to find an answer to that question was, it kind of bothered me for a very long time. I think a year or 2 years, I was like really troubled by that question. And while I was thinking about this question, I was also working at Ogilvy, and Ogilvy at that time, even now, it's like extremely interesting, but I don't know how things are on ground. But at that time, it was absolutely madness, and it was madness in a good sense. So I was fortunate to work with Prem on one side, and then I had Kaval and Naveen who were also I'm fortunate to work with them even now on a particular project. But all these wonderful people who were there, there were times when Piyush would himself get involved in a couple of pieces of work, there were times when random requests would come, like, Piyush needs to go and represent Indian creativity in Japan in some conference. And then, we are having like 12-hour long conversations from morning late into the night, trying to figure out that what should be the angle, and, what is Indian creativity, then what is creativity, and then, should we go 2000 years into history, or should we talk about it from a modernist sense? And all of these things, and then finally how things come together and how an idea takes birth. And like while I was learning a lot of marketing structures on some of the clients, but it was in Ogilvy where I saw beautiful ideas taking birth and planners actually having a contribution in those ideas, like the work that happened on C8, the work that was happening on Tata Sky. And I was immensely proud, although I hadn't contributed into the ideation part, but I was immensely proud because at least from a strategy part, I had contributed to finding that, nailing down that problem and finding a way to open it up. And that's where my existential crisis kind of found a solution with all of these experiences, that I was like, okay, at the stage at which I am in my career, probably 80% of what I'm doing is a lot of grunt work. But despite that 80%, there is that 20%, which is probably so precious to me, like, nailing down that problem and trying to come up with a solution, thinking about it a little out of the box. Almost like, giving a birth, like, men can't give birth, but the closest you will probably come to is like, in a idea form, you kind of come to that when you've been thinking about it for days, and then you kind of arrive at something which feels like, okay, this is it. That high was something which I loved. And I was like, this 20% and 80%, the ratio is going to change as I move up. And, as I grow, that, probably the whole ratio will flip, and I'll be doing 80% of the things which are very precious to me. And that's exactly what happened as I started moving up. The teams grew and things like that. So I had to do less and less of that, the early analysis and things like that. I was more and more involved in, the final decision making and trying to find that gap. So yeah, so that was my journey, wherein, the whole crisis kind of a situation did happen, and then I found the resolution, and then I was sure after that okay, this is something I'm going to continue doing and continue growing myself in.
And the move to Singapore organically came with the agency, or was there something you wanted, like, like you kind of, I felt like in your career journey and your life journey, you have been in, like, to some, it just serendipity happened and they found themselves and they dealt with it. I get the sense that you have chosen the move to Calcutta and chosen Nepal and then chosen Mumbai and chosen. There was a lot of self-choice driving it. Was that also a choice? Like, it was a desire?
It was a plan which was 5 years in the making. So I wanted to get on a flight. I wanted to have a visa stamp on my passport. When I went to Nepal, they didn't stamp my passport. I was pissed off.
Tell me about it. This is beautiful.
Because between India and Nepal, you can travel on any legal document. You can use your driver's license and you can travel. They don't stamp your passport. But I was really, really curious that, what does it feel like to get on an aircraft? And when I started my first job in Sachi, because of Proctor, the teams, there would be everyone else who would be traveling. And, as a young planner, I would see, the creatives traveling for shoots. I would see my senior planners traveling for consumer work. I would see all of that happen. I would even see a junior production person in the films department traveling up and down to Singapore. Why? Because, those days when film had to be transported, you had to physically transport it in certain urgent kind of situations, right?
Right.
So he would be sent to Singapore and back. And, I was like, what is going on? Why am I the only one who doesn't get to travel and do all of this? So in the very early days in Sachi, I decided that I'm going to make this happen at some point in time. I have no clue. And I asked my boss that, if I, at any point, if I want to move to Singapore from India, what are the things that I should be having? And she gave me really good advice, which was like, have some of the businesses which are regional in nature, and therefore Procter, and therefore Mead Johnson, and therefore Unilever, names that will be familiar, and then have experience in like good agencies. So therefore my focus was to have these brands on my portfolio. The fun part of it was coming from some of the other brands where interesting work was happening, but I definitely focused a lot on these brands to also make sure that 5 years later I'm ready, where I've done a lot of regional work. So that was one part. The way the move actually happened was very interesting. Actually, it was a funny story, because I knew someone who told me to apply to Gray, and I applied and didn't get a response. And I actually got a response saying that, okay, thanks for applying, we will let you know if we want to speak to you. And then I think a month or two passed, and at that time there was the Walk Awards happening. And the person that I had applied to, the manager who I had applied to at that point in time, she was at the Walk Award show. She had a case that she had entered the award show. That case didn't win. And the case that won was the case that I had written along with Prem and, Jay and all. And she's heard the name and she's like, why does this name sound familiar? So she came back, saw her emails and realized it was me, and called me the next day. Like in less than a month, I was in Singapore. So it was that one paper which kind of competed with my boss's paper and, things like that. So that's actually the turning point where like 5 years of preparation, but nothing was moving. I didn't know how to make that break happen. I was trying every time I got an opportunity, I was trying, but nothing was moving. And then finally that one turning point happened. And when it happens very fast. Like in less than a month I was there.
And then how has the move been? How has that experience been very different? I mean, the pace and the rhythm of an agency.
The early days were very hard. They were extremely exciting, but they were very hard because the culture within the ad business in India is very dynamic and very noisy, and it's like active and all. In my first job over here, I felt like, I'm in like some, hospital sanitized kind of an environment, because people are quiet. They are like looking at their laptops and, if you have a meeting with the person sitting next to you, they'll send you an email as opposed to just telling you that, So it was a huge cultural shock for me, where I used to be more loud, more flamboyant, and like, the planners and creatives in India, at least they tried to be more like, colorful in that nature. So culturally, it was very hard for me in those early days to tone myself down, kind of make myself a part and acceptable in this culture. But after the early days, I realized that, maybe that's not exactly what I thought, was not exactly what was going on. It's a culturally different approach, but there are ways to spark creativity even in that kind of a environment. So early days was Gray, and after which I decided to move to VML, which was like a small boutique hot shop at that point in time. They were into technology consulting. They were building platforms. They were doing really well. They wanted to build an advertising marketing side to the agency, and I thought that was exciting. So I joined along with my creative partner, and we were trying to build that. And then VML kind of grew, and I grew with the agency at the same time. So that was pretty much like long journey in Singapore also. I think the ad years in Singapore had been almost eight odd years of advertising.
And then now you're independent, or what do you do?
Yeah, so the early days of pandemic is when I decided that I'm going to start something of my own. I had no clue what is it that I want to do, and when I quit, one thing I knew is that I'm going to take a break, because I have never taken a break. And it's been going on for like 15 16 years. It had been going on for 15 16 years, where it was always like, from the school days to the college days, like something is keeping me occupied, busy, and trying to earn something, and always that pressure. And finally I was at that stage where I was like, I can take a break, I don't need to worry about anything. So I took that break. That break was beautiful, because I spent days and days and days doing nothing, like nothing. I have no clue whether I want to start my company, I want to take on a job, I want to get out of advertising or stay in advertising. I did not think about anything. I would spend my days walking around. I would spend my days like, watching long series of shows on Netflix. Like, I would pick like sitcoms with like 15 seasons, and then every season has like 25 episodes. So I would pick the longest one and watch them from end to end. But after that 1 or 2 months of not thinking about anything, things started falling in place, and I started reflecting more and more. So while I was not trying to consciously spend time on thinking what I want to do, my brain was subconsciously putting things together, and things which had been important to me, things which I had not been able to do lately, started surfacing. And that led to me creating my YouTube channel, which was like, okay, let me start off this YouTube channel and share some of the things that I have learned over the years. And that channel started seeing some momentum, like people were liking the content, gave me a little more excitement, and motivated me to do more. So that was going on. At the same time, I was talking to people like from startup world, from client side, from different kinds of industries, just talking to a lot of people, trying to understand their experiences, things like that, which started opening up some consulting opportunities. So to a point wherein I had a consulting gig, all I needed was a company, so that I could take on that project. And that's when I finally decided that, okay, let me start my company. So I started my company, I completed that project, and by then it was very clear, because my YouTube channel had become a very close, something very close to my heart. And I loved the kind of comments that I would receive from random people all over the world, like, saying that, okay, I've been looking for this for the last couple of years, and finally someone. So I also covered a lot of niche topics which were hard to find anywhere on the internet. So all of that gave me so much of thrill, so much of joy, that I decided that, yeah, it's probably time that I took the education side of things a little more seriously, which took me down a rabbit hole. And it's a rabbit hole which probably you guys have also experienced very closely.
Surely, yes.
But it's a very satisfying rabbit hole, because a few things happened. One, all these years, there is a little bit of a nurturing side to me, which had that desire to learn something and then pass it on and teach and grow people. So that was one side to me. The second side was that, because I was fortunate to work on a lot of clients where marketing is extremely structured and beautifully done. So I realized that there is so much of knowledge over here, which even in a business school is not being taught, right? A lot of practical way of doing marketing. So that is something which is missing, and nobody teaches you unless you're fortunate to get a job in, say, a Unilever or a P&G. And then on the third side, I had an interest um, in the science side of marketing. And I used to follow a couple of places like, Ehrenberg Bus in Australia, and the Byron Sharp and the team and the work that comes out from there. And then there's IPA in the UK and the work that has been, the research that they've been doing and the work that has come out of there. Similarly, a couple of universities and a couple of other institutions around the world. There's a lot of beautiful work happening in terms of trying to understand how exactly does marketing work, and trying to have principles that can actually help you be more effective in your work. So even compared to like 15 years ago, if you look at marketing as a profession now, there is a lot more science available, which has been, a lot more progress has happened. And just like other streams of science, in marketing also there is an element of science which is now dominant, and which you can utilize. So all of these things started connecting, that I want to give this kind of knowledge which is practical. I enjoy doing that, and there is an element of effectiveness which nobody talks about, and people keep on making the same mistakes, keep on repeating the same mistakes, because some boss said so, some guru online said so, and things like that. So all of that led to a very clear course for marketing strategy which started forming in my head. And then the rest was creating that website, and creating the whole ecosystem around it, linking up with the work that I was doing on my YouTube channel. And then that happened. So last year I spent a lot of time on building that course, putting it out there. And since the course has been live, I kind of double up. On one side, I keep promoting and marketing the course, and I keep on doing something or the other around that. And on the other side, I keep on consulting brands. And I've been working, luckily, I've been fortunate to have a lot of brands. And in a way, the two help each other. The more I get vocal, the more new connections that I make, they either turn into consulting clients, or sometimes it starts with education and then it kind of ends up in a consulting project. Sometimes it starts with consulting and then it opens up opportunities for education. So it's both sides kind of help each other and grow each other, which is very satisfying.
Now, having been in smaller organizations and large ones, and then coming to Singapore and seeing an organization grow to a large size, and now being yourself, is the idea to go back and create an organization, or you're going to keep this balance and independence that you probably have since the break?
Yeah, no, I've loved this independence, not being kind of limited by a lot of structures, and I can change the whole direction of my business tomorrow if I want to, because I'm the owner. So there's that beauty to that independence. There is a beauty to the fact that I have managed to build something. I might not be like the most successful consultant or the highest grossing consultant over there, but it's mine, and I'm doing well, and I'm doing better than what I was doing previously, and all of these are like achievements that I feel proud of. At the same time, it's probably a law of the universe that when you try and run away from something, it kind of follows you with greater velocity. So in the early days, when I was still unsure whether I should start off on my own, and I was like, maybe the safer route is to take on a job. And pandemic was there, and there was no opportunity going at and that's when I started getting opportunities for consulting projects. I was like, okay, I should start off by myself, because I can take on these projects and I can do that work. And then since the time I have been on my independent path, I get a lot of these opportunities which come my way. And usually my answer is that, I want to convert them into a consulting project. Thank you very much. And, I would want to continue building what I am building. Um, unlike unlike some people who might have an interest in turning this into like an agency kind of a thing, I actually don't have an interest in doing anything like that. My interest lies in keeping it extremely lean. Maybe in future, one person that I can jam with, that would be good rather than being a lone wolf. But I do want to build my education side more and more so that, that can run automatically by itself, and it kind of reduces the pressure on me having to find consulting gigs. And also I can be more picky about the kind of consulting work that I do. So, but yeah, as in the way things have been, it's been so good that I don't want to go back to a very structured kind of a process. Sometimes it's much harder, not just in terms of the effort that I need to put, in terms of the kind of things that I need to do, from accounting to taking care of all of those things which I've never done, to generating sales and leads for myself. So these are scary things. There was a time when I was worried that, is it taking a toll on my mental health? But as work, I think y'all know it as business people yourself, that, you put in the inputs, the outputs will follow. And, in the long run, it all settles in and works out. So yeah. So it's been fun. I don't think I'll probably go back to a full-time work mode probably anytime soon.
And in all of this journey, have you found time for love and other interests, or it's all been work and desire?
No, I've had my share of personal life on the side, and currently I've been seeing my girlfriend and I, we kind of live together. We've been around for like 3.5 years odd. So yeah, so there is a personal side which is stable, which is good, which kind of helps me to focus on the on having my own business, trying to build that side of business. So yeah, so it's pretty good.
Wonderful, Rahul. Now here is the question that I always ask a person in advertising. It probably is easier for you given that your parents were in an allied business and had printing, but maybe it's different. Are you able to tell your parents what do you do? What do you do?
Okay. So I've tried to do this a lot of times, and over the years, their nods have turned into very convincing nods, that as if they really understand what I'm doing. But then I've heard them trying to explain what I do to others, and that's where I know that they have no clue. What they end up doing is that every time they would see an ad on TV and they're like, "Oh, my son has done this." Like that was their way. The whole strategy part, and what are you writing and why are you going and talking to all these people, and how nobody really cared. This is what my son has done.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the bane of this kind of industry, which is very different to what our parents' ecosystems have been. I guess it's something that it's a cross we'll have to bear generationally, and then maybe our kids will have an easier time.
Correct.
So my sense is that, some of them may want to be influencers, and then we'll be scratching our heads trying to explain that.
Yeah.
So, always wonderful talking to you, Rahul. Thank you so much for the time that you've given. If you want to talk about something else, if you want to specifically, I'll say, talk about the course, etc., send me some stuff, then I can at least add that into the conversations that we craft and create, so people find Rahul's space on Decode Labs. Did I get that right?
Decode Strategy Labs. Yeah.
Decode Strategy Labs is what you need to be looking up on YouTube, folks. And if you haven't looked it up, you should definitely check it out. I have found many of this stuff very interesting to watch myself personally. And Rahul is a new friend who we expect to be an old friend going forward. Thank you so much for participating in the human side.
Lovely speaking to you, Ravi. Thanks a ton. Thanks for having me.
Like this video? Want to get more great content like this? Then sign up today at centerofgravity.in/list.
When you sign up, you get our interviews with great brand builders.
Case stories, get case studies from decades of work from Center of Gravity's archive.
Blog Digest, the best stories from our extensive blog in an easy to read monthly digest.
Get the human side in your inbox.
Sign up now.